Hey, this is Super Game Ghost, and you're watching the 10 hardest bosses on the PS1. Let's start.
Number 10.
Tekken was first released in arcades in December 1994 and later for the PS1 in 1995. The storyline of Tekken revolves around the King of Iron Fist tournament, a martial arts competition organized by Heihachi Mishima. In the original Tekken game, Heihachi is depicted as the main antagonist. He is the ruthless and cunning patriarch of the Mishima Zaibatsu, a powerful weapon manufacturing corporation in the Tekken universe. Heihachi is best known for throwing his 5-year-old son Kazuya off a cliff during martial arts training because he thought he was too weak. What a great dad. Heihachi also happens to be the final boss in Tekken 1, so naturally he is pretty hard to defeat. Especially if you have the difficulty setting set to ultra hard. He will spam moves that will constantly knock you to the floor, so it becomes impossible to even hit this evil dude.
Number 9.
Final Fantasy IX is a role-playing video game developed and published by Square. It was released in 2000 in both Japan and North America. The storyline centers on a conflict among nations in the medieval fantasy realm of Gaia. It follows Zidane Tribal, a thief who plays a part in the abduction of Princess Garnet under the guise of a ploy by the neighboring nation of Lindblum. This game is very good. From what I hear, it is the 9th best Final Fantasy game so far. Anyway, the hardest boss in FF9 would have to be Ozma. Ozma appears as a floating orb-like entity surrounded by swirling energy and ominous dark clouds. Its appearance is otherworldly and enigmatic, which is fitting for a formidable optional boss. Ozma is renowned for its extreme difficulty and unpredictable attack patterns. It possesses incredibly high stats including HP, MP, and resistance to various status effects. Its attacks are devastating and can inflict massive damage on the party, with powerful magic spells, status ailments, and instant death moves.
Number 8.
In Driver, players assume the role of Tanner, an undercover police officer tasked with infiltrating and dismantling criminal organizations through his skills as a driver. The game is set in the fictional cities of Miami, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York City during the fictional 1970s era. Yes, that's right, all those cities are fictional, and the 1970s never occurred, I think. Anyway, Driver doesn't really have bosses, but it does have a pretty difficult final stage. You have to evade both cops and criminals in this mission as they constantly try to ram into your car, and you have to do this for a good 5 minutes. Honestly, even the tutorial level in Driver is pretty difficult if you don't know what you're supposed to do. Or maybe I just suck at these kinds of games. Who knows?
Number 7.
Final Fantasy VII has several tough boss battles. The most challenging bosses in FF7 are typically narrowed down to either Ruby Weapon or Emerald Weapon. Ruby Weapon is very hard to deal with, however there are certain ways to completely negate all his attacks with the right equipment. So I would have to go with Emerald Weapon as the de facto hardest boss in FF7. Just purely based on the fact that unless you have the underwater materia equipped, you are facing a 20-minute timer which when counts down to 0 results in an automatic game over. Also, the idea of facing a huge robotic sea creature at the bottom of the ocean is kinda terrifying. Of course, like most bosses, there are ways to cheese your way through this fight as well. Most notably by using Keitsa's Slots Limit Break to get an auto win.
Number 6.
Like most Castlevania games, Symphony of the Night isn't really known for absurdly difficult bosses. There are loads of items in SOTN which make an already easy to beat game even easier. However, there is one boss that can be quite challenging. That boss is known as Galamoth. He is an optional boss who can be found in the Upside Down Catacombs. Characterized by his immense size and formidable attacks, he is easily able to take your life total down to 0 in mere seconds. Thankfully, he has a lightning-based attack which you can absorb by wearing the barrel circlet. Or you can completely cheese him with the overpowered, albeit boring, shield rod plus Alucard shield combo.
Number 5.
Wild Arms 2 is set in the world of Filgaia, a frontier planet recovering from a catastrophic war known as the Metal Demons War. Players follow the story of Ashley Winchester, a young member of the anti-terrorist organization known as ARMS, alongside his companions, the mysterious swordsman Brad Evans and the spellcaster Lilka. Wild Arms 2 retains the traditional RPG mechanics of its predecessor while introducing new features and improvements. Players explore various locations on the world map, including towns, dungeons, and other points of interest. The game features a mix of 2D sprite-based environments and 3D polygonal battles. The hardest boss in this game is Ragu o Ragulo. Ragu is actually a recurring optional boss who has appeared in every single Wild Arms game. The thing with Ragu is that he's usually able to one-shot the entire party. So most strategies involve a rinse and repeat cycle of putting him to sleep, then dealing damage to him.
Number 4.
Nightmare Creatures is a survival horror / 3D hack and slash game developed by Callisto Entertainment and published by Activision. It was released for the PlayStation 1 in 1997. In Nightmare Creatures, players assume the roles of either Ignatius or Nadia. The game's storyline revolves around the resurrection of a nefarious alchemist named Adam Crowley, who seeks to unleash an army of creatures upon London and plunge the city into chaos. Consequently, Adam Crowley takes on demonic form and is Nightmare Creatures' final boss. What makes Crowley the hardest boss is the fact that he can completely destroy your character in a few hits. There's also a ledge that he will knock you off of and insta-kill you every now and then. I know what you're all thinking, but no, this is not a pre-alpha version of Bloodborne.
Number 3.
Parasite Eve 2 leans much harder into the survival horror genre and emulates the Resident Evil franchise in many ways. Even the director chosen by Square for this project had previously worked on the original Resident Evil game at Capcom. Parasite Eve 2 is set in the year 2000, 2 years after the events of the first game. Parasite Eve 2 once again follows the protagonist Aya Bria, a member of the FBI's fictional mitochondrial investigation and suppression team, MIST. Aya is sent to investigate bizarre incidents involving mutated creatures known as neo-mitochondrial creatures in the American desert town of Dryfield, Nevada. The final boss in Parasite Eve is yet another incarnation of Mitochondria Eve. The battle against Eve is challenging and requires players to utilize their combat skills, resources, and strategic thinking to overcome her attacks. If Eve opts to be randomly and excessively aggressive, this battle can prove to be unexpectedly challenging. This is particularly true if she boasts a high maximum HP, which is contingent upon the number of body parts you manage to destroy in the preceding encounter.
Number 2.
Final Fantasy Tactics is a tactical role-playing game developed and published by Square for the PlayStation 1. It was released in 1997 in Japan and 1998 in North America. Final Fantasy Tactics follows the story of Ramza Beov, a nobleman caught in the midst of a bloody conflict known as the Lion War. As the kingdom of Ivlis is torn apart by political intrigue, religious strife, and the ambitions of rival factions, Ramza becomes embroiled in a conspiracy involving ancient relics, demonic forces, and the fate of the kingdom itself. I've probably put more hours into FF Tactics than I'd ever like to admit. This game is one of my all-time favorites for any console. The hardest boss in this game would have to be the nonsensical English localization that you were forced to read every now and then. Just kidding. Now the hardest boss battle would have to be the second battle in Riavane's castle against Ygraf and his transformation into Velius. This boss can potentially be a hardlock for many players who do not have the proper equipment or class composition. I believe that the first time I ever got to this portion of the game, I was just unable to progress no matter how hard I tried. And eventually, I was forced to start a completely new game. The issue with this fight is that during the first phase, Ramza must fight the overpowered Ygraf all by himself. Then, if you manage to beat him, you are rewarded with an even more difficult second phase. Velius, who can blow up your entire party on his own, also sees fit to summon 3 other demons that are all able to cast spells that will one-shot any party member. Yeah, this was a really tough fight.
Number 1.
Star Ocean: The Second Story is a role-playing video game developed by Tri-Ace and published by Enix. It was released for the PlayStation 1 in 1998 in Japan and 1999 in North America. Set in a fictional universe where space travel and advanced technology coexist with medieval-style societies. Star Ocean: The Second Story follows the story of two protagonists, Claude C. Kenny, a young ensign in the Earth Federation, and Rena Lanford, a girl from the underdeveloped planet Expo. This was one of my favorite RPGs growing up and is by far the best game in the series. The game is hard enough on the regular Earth difficulty, yet it has two more tiers of difficulty with the Galaxy and Universe modes. Not only that, but this game also has some of the most difficult bosses and requires hours of grinding in order to get the proper equipment to defeat many of them. The most difficult boss by far would have to be Indalecio with his limiter off. The limiter is sort of a plot device which also considerably weakens the boss when it is turned on. If the limiter is not turned on for Indalecio, he becomes nearly impossible to kill since most of his attacks will one-shot your entire party.
Thanks for watching. Check out my other videos.